Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show with me, Andrew Willett. We're in the midst of WNBA coverage and excited to bring our content to you. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Without further ado, a pro basketball show. Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show. We are so excited to talk today about a few teams right there in the middle. I'm excited to be joined by Maggie Hendricks from Bally Sports. She knows all about the W, but we are going to focus today on the Bally Sports teams, and that's the Dallas Winds, the Atlanta Dream, the Indiana Fever, and the Minnesota Lynx. Maggie, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here as well. Let's get right down to business, as we've got four teams that we're going to talk about today with, I think, a lot of intrigue around each of them. Absolutely. We know who the top four in the league are. I feel confident about kind of who the worst two teams are, and I believe one of them is in this group. I also think that there are three of them from this group that are right in the middle six, which I just find so fascinating. I talked about it last night on our episode with Nick Andre, and just kind of this middle section where I think a lot could happen, a lot could change. And so we'll just start, get right into it. The order of that is going to be best to worst. That's how I'm going to start it off, and that's from my opinion. But we're going to start off with Dallas, who I think is the best of these four Bally Sports teams. So far, they've opened the season very well. Just came in sixth on my power rankings with Nick Andre, and that episode comes out here soon. But I didn't see this team being as high as third for anybody else to start the season. What have you liked out in Dallas so far?
Well, I think they just have found chemistry really quickly. I think that Latricia Trammell has kind of made it so that they're enjoying the game again. And I think when you talk to players who were there for previous administrations, for lack of a better term, they just seem to be loving the game again. And that's important. You know, it's basketball. It's fun. It should be fun. Even when the stakes are really high, as they are for professional athletes, it's still basketball. So I think LT has done a good job bringing in a culture. And then also, I think the fact that Natasha Howard and Arike wanted to play together for a long time, and now they are, and they're at the core of the team, I think that helps a lot too.
That helps, and then the play of Satu Savali, who has just been awesome so far.
Yeah, we published an article yesterday. I talked to Satu when she was here in my hometown of Chicago on Sunday, and she said she used the words effortless and like she was gliding around the court. And we all know Satu's injury history. It's not great. So when someone who has been through that many injuries feels that confident on the court, that's just going to translate beautifully into the play. And then we saw, what did she score? 20 and 22 points on Tuesday night.
I believe so.
I mean, yeah. And she's one of the top 5 scorers in the league as of right now. So, I mean, it's so great to see.
Happy to see that. And I think that's really interesting that you mentioned rookie head coach and coach LT bringing back a little bit of joy to this team, where I think they had a lot of question marks coming into the season, maybe around the depth mostly. But you mentioned kind of those top two players, Natasha Howard and Arike Ogunbowale. I think Natasha Howard makes a huge difference down low, especially as a presence outside of Tiara McCowan down low, because Tiara McCowan's not going to play all 40 minutes. Natasha Howard has been really good in the minutes that Tiara hasn't played, and to play out there when Tiara McCowan is out there. So I think kind of her versatility plays a big role on this Dallas team. I'm curious, though, from Arike's perspective, what have you liked about kind of her start to the season? It seems to be a lot of shooting from my perspective.
I mean, it's Arike. She's going to shoot. She's a shooter. She's going to shoot. And when she feels hot, she's really going to shoot. But I actually, compared to last season, and even looking at her assist numbers, I'm seeing her pass in
Hmm.
situations where she would have probably taken an ill-advised shot last season. We're just seeing more moments of her playing a much smarter game. And I think part of that has to do in having some confidence in who she's playing with, but I think it's also just she is confident in the system. And so yeah, I'm seeing her complete her game, I think is the
Hmm.
best way to put it. Like we're seeing an Enrique who isn't just a scorer, wants to be great on defense, wants to be great at moving the ball around, wants to be spread the court out, all of those things. And I think that's so exciting because she's in her fourth season. So we're starting to see her mature as an athlete. And I mean, and
Hmm.
that's just a huge, huge thing. To see that difference in how she can play.
Well, and don't get me wrong, because she has been a flamethrower at times throughout the early part of this season as well. But that's a really encouraging sign, like you said, and also like the amount of scrutiny that was put on her as such a young pro in the
Yeah.
league.
Well,
Um,
and she has plenty of pressure on her right now because in signing her to a long-term contract, in Dallas has made it very clear you are the face of our franchise. And so the pressure on her to win something for Dallas, for a city she's adopted, like her brother's even moved, when he's not playing football, he's living in Dallas. Like it's become a very important place to her. And so it's a pretty big, there's a lot of pressure on her, but she doesn't seem bugged by that at all. She seems just like, okay, yeah, I want to be the one that brings Dallas a championship.
Really, really cool. That's and I know I saw you wrote about her before the season. Like you said, clear face of this franchise. Excited to see that kind of some of those other parts of her game, as well as allowing her to be the best version of herself. She can bring that as well. Defensively is
Mhm.
where I'm curious about because we talked about three bigs: Satu Sabali, Tierra McCowan, Natasha Howard. And I thought maybe on offense that would be just a little bit much on or too many bids down low. But on defense, I thought that would be a great thing. What are you noticing from the defense so far? Do they just have the pieces to be defensively really good, like LT wants to be?
I mean, obviously LT's known for her defense. That's like what she did with the Sparks when the Sparks won championships, all that. But I think they're going to be great on defense once everybody is healthy
Mm.
and in town. So like Tierra McCowan has missed a few games with knee injury, and now she's going over to have duties with the Turkish national team. And so when you have those things, that puts some pressure on the roster, which is why they went out and signed Kalani Brown, who is 6'5", 6", very tall. I just know what the few times I've talked to her, I felt very tiny, and I'm 5'6". So um like they went out and got her. She played 27 minutes on Tuesday night. So I think that helped with how they are handling their lack of bodies because it's so funny how quickly a team has such great depth and how quickly that can change to no depth. Because like without Diamond DeShields, without Tierra, without Lou Lopez Teneshal, who they thought was going to be playing, like it just is, it's very quick how quickly that can happen and when you need other bodies in.
Yeah, I mean the loss of Diamond to Shields I thought would play a bigger impact. So far they've been really good. I think my last question for you on Dallas before we move on to the next best team is Satu Sabali. Is she the best player on this team?
Ooh, that is a good question. I feel like she's the most complete player
Hmm.
on the team because she can do so much on defense and offense. But it's hard to really rank her and Enrique because they bring such different things to the court. So I feel okay calling them the co-best people because of how well they complement each other. So yeah, I'm okay with calling them the co-best team players on the team.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say. That's probably a great thing if they bring such different traits to the table at such a high level. I mean, that's why this Dallas team has a chance to be really good this year. Um,
Absolutely.
as we move on to the next Bally Sports team, that's the Atlanta Dream. I think they kind of remain in just an exciting rebuild. It's like so far from where they were 18 months, 2 years ago.
Totally. I mean,
And
when you think of the like chaos, honestly, that they were in, and how Tanisha Wright has done an outstanding job calming that down, and how Dan Padover is doing a great job putting the team together and thinking long term. He's not like, I need to go win a championship right now. He's like, I want to win a ton of championships. So that's going to take more building, you know?
mhm.
He's not trying to do what the Liberty are doing. Nothing wrong with what the Liberty are doing, but I think everybody in Atlanta understands, from their front office people to the players, that they are building something huge and important,
Hmm.
not just basketball, but like a franchise for the city of Atlanta. That so things are going to take more time. When you build things correctly, it takes more time, and that's I think what's happening in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a long-term build, but as we start to look at kind of this season alone, it's just the second season for Ryan Howard. Alicia Gray has been awesome coming in. So I had really high expectations for this team heading into the year. But there's still a lot of basketball to be played.
Oh yeah.
Where do you think this team this year could reasonably end up? Both if things go well, or if they spin out and maybe they don't do so hot.
They just missed the playoffs last year mostly because of injuries. So like obviously staying healthy is always what you want to see, but man, they have some players right now who are really they have players who are already playing at a high level. Like Cheyenne Parker right now is playing so well. Alicia Gray, you talk about a perfect fit. She just looks thrilled every time she takes the court. And like I said about Dallas, happy teams play better. They just do. So I think we're starting to see that. They've had a tough beginning of their schedule, so that's why I think 2-2, it's not great. But I think long term, I definitely think we're going to see them make the postseason. So I think we'll probably see them around that 6-7 spot. But I think there's just going to be long term great things for them, especially as we see players like Cheyenne and Alicia and Ryan, and then Haley Jones, their first round draft pick, had a great game the other night. She was so efficient. She had 13 points in 18 minutes. I mean, you can't ask for more. Like, so, I mean, I guess you could ask for 15 points, but, I mean, I think that there's a lot of reasons to be excited about Atlanta.
I agree. There's so much there that I could touch on. I was a huge Haley Jones supporter through the draft. Really excited when she got to Atlanta, but like you said, not the greatest start heading into the year. I kind of penciled them in for that fifth seed. I thought the addition of Alicia Gray was awesome. I thought Tanisha Wright was very deserving in that top three coach of the year last year, and I believe was also in the top three this year for
Mhm.
my coach of the year prediction. But Maggie, the one thing so far for me, it's the offense. I want more movement. I want more actions to get Ryan Howard running off screens, actions to lead that finish with a post up rather than just settling right into the post up. I want
Yeah.
Cheyenne Parker to run some more offense, like playing through her with cutters going all around. What does Tanisha Wright need to do to kind of kickstart this offense and get a peak Atlanta at the end of the year?
Well, the funny thing is about Atlanta's offense is they're ranked third in scoring right now. So like they're doing it. And Cheyenne is even up 4 points on her average from last year. Her scoring average was like 11 last year, and it's around 15 this year. So like it's one of those things where their offense is actually doing a good job. However, as we all know, all offense needs to be generated off of defense. And if their defense isn't doing the job, it they could score 100 points. If the other team scores 101, it doesn't matter, So I think honestly, what they need to do to improve their offense is work on the way it plays off of their defense.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, and Tanisha Wright, I believe another coach known for defense heading into Atlanta, and maybe
Both as
not.
a player and a coach.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe it hasn't been up to par to this point, but that's a really interesting point. You can see, I think, like at least at the start of the season, they're trying to run, they're trying to get downhill a lot. But I think for me personally, it's just a little stagnant. for my taste. But I think that's really interesting with the defense leading to a little more offense.
Yeah.
Next point I want to touch on is the bids down low because you mentioned Haley Jones stepping in as a rookie and Cheyenne Parker up in her average, but to go along with Nia Toffee and her shooting ability, Monique Billings has played pretty well off the bench so far. So I guess my question there is what do each of these bids like bring to the table, and how do those minutes work out, considering maybe only two of them can play at any one time?
Well, I mean, I think when you think of, let me step back. Like, first of all, Nia Coffey and Monique Billings both dealt with a lot of injuries last year. So I think it's important for them to just kind of balance each other out, like to make sure that they both stay healthy this season, knock on wood. You want them to stay as healthy as possible. So I think that the smart thing to do is kind of go with the hot hand on any, and that's a luxury to have the ability to have both of those bigs and Cheyenne Parker in there. Cheyenne's been doing a great job in the paint and getting second chance points and just making sure that it's that they don't necessarily leave the paint without some sort of points, and she gets fouled a lot too, and she's pretty good at that too. So I think there's a lot of opportunity with their bigs to balance off of each other, and then heck, that makes some great scoring opportunities for Ryan Howard. And it's funny you bring up Haley Jones and that when it was college basketball season, my partner at Bally Sports and I, Lauren Moses, we often talked about how Haley Jones is a guard with the physicality of a forward. And what a gift that is for Tanisha Wright to have somebody that can act like a big, but also has like the speed and ability to move around like a guard. I mean, I think this is there's a lot of great players out of this draft class, but like my crystal ball I think we're going to be seeing Haley Jones in a Hall of Fame. Like we really will, because she is just a special, special player.
I love that. I love that. But I think all of that, forgive me, I think I forgot Nas Hillman in that list, who has shown a lot of progress. There's a lot of depth down there. I like that idea of just kind of spacing out those minutes for right now. Like you said, Haley Jones can step up into that point guard spot, which is kind of my last question with this team, because I'm curious if you could, Erin McDonald with this team specifically, why is she the right fit for that starting point guard spot?
Well, I think first of all, Ari is very smart and understands how to distribute the ball and knows her teammates very well. I think coaching in the off season for Arizona taught her so much, especially for the job of being a point guard, right? So like she was absolutely, I think coaches and point guards go together for a reason, because they have to look at the court the same way. And so I think her watching as a coach, watching Arizona, it just brought out something different in her, because I think we are seeing some great things. And also, they announced today Danielle Robinson had a surgery on her knee, I believe. So she's going to be out for a while too. So like, it's a little bit of all of the above, but I think Ari is doing a great job, and it is, you can't, there's only so many books you can read about being a point guard, right? You got to just learn on the job. And so I think she's doing a lot of that.
Interesting. Okay. And I guess with Danielle Robinson, that news came out just here recently. So Erin McDonald has a chance to really take over that point guard spot. And then I would love to see more Haley Jones like that, because I mean, you mentioned her potentially just we've seen it running the point with some bench units, and kind of the defensive versatility that Atlanta has a chance to achieve with Jones and AD Durr and Ryan Howard, Alicia Gray, Cheyenne Parker.
We haven't even talked about AD. They're having a fantastic, really doing a great job of bringing a spark off the bench, like the very best kind. And it's so good to see them healthy again after dealing with so much from getting COVID.
Agreed. I mean, this team, a lot of fun to watch. I'm excited to see as they hit their potential. I'm hoping for that 5th seed. I guess, do you think that they can finish in the running for a top four, top five seed?
I mean, it's going to be tough because we don't, because I mean, when you look particularly at say like the top, if you say the top three teams are the Liberty Aces and Mystics, they've got to get through the sun, they've got to get through the sky. I love how it always sounds like a weather report when you're talking about all the WNBA teams. So, I mean, getting a top five seed would be tough, but that's not impossible. Like it depends on how everybody else's seasons play out too.
All right, so now we will transition to kind of the bottom two teams here. But a team I was pretty high on. This is my hometown team. I hope that wasn't making my decision biased as I had them at ninth heading into the season. But the Fever, I was excited about the energy with Christy Sides, new head coach. But I think they didn't get off to the greatest start, but how could you against Connecticut and
Right.
then New York that had Stewie going off for 45 points? But how good could this Indiana Fever team be, in your opinion?
Oh my gosh, when you see Aaliyah Boston and Alyssa Smith playing off of each other, like how could you not be excited about that? So like say the other night against Connecticut that they really pushed for a comeback. And they
Mhm.
did actually have done that against Connecticut twice. They've come very close to beating Connecticut and not quite finishing because they're a young team and they're a newly constructed team that they're still getting to know each other. So when you have teams that are young like that, finishing out a game is really hard. They don't always know how to do it. I
Mhm.
remember a long time ago when I covered the Bulls when Fred Hoiberg was the coach, that him talking about that was the thing with young teams is they have to learn how to win. They may win the first three quarters, but that doesn't mean they can finish it out. And so I think that's what we're seeing with Indiana is that they're this young team who is doing some great stuff. And there's so much energy and the difference in energy around them this season because they were in Chicago for the preseason game and I've done some interviews and everything. So I've seen them a few times. And there's just a different energy and they're also not getting hung up on losses. Like they want to learn from losses, but they're not thinking about that loss 5 days later, you know?
Mhm.
And that, so I feel like their ceiling is very high because they're learning the right way.
I love that. And again, it's another one that is building for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at this season, I mean, I've loved the play of Aaliyah Boston and Alyssa Smith. And Alyssa Smith was someone who I wanted to be up there for my most improved player, but her stats were already so good last year. I was like, it's gonna be tough for her to improve that much
Yeah.
over. She's just a really good player. And Morton high low, bid to bid passing with Aaliyah Boston. Like you said, that
There was that one pass the other night where Melissa was in the paint and she hit Aaliyah at the 3 point line and Aaliyah hit the 3 pointer. And I was like, this is what you want to see. You know, like right now, maybe the wins won't come, but when you see things like that and you know what that's going to mean for the future, I mean, like I can't even think of the same equivalent of like the current players that would be, but like the big star players. But that's just what you want to see. You want to see players get that chemistry, and Melissa and Aaliyah already have it, and they've played 4 games together. It's insane.
so much fun, going to be so much fun. And I guess the question kind of shifts to the talent around them, and it's a lot of young talent as well. So I've compiled this list here for us of just the different young players for the Fever. And I want to start with who helps them the most right now out there on the court versus who's most likely to help them in the long term, or if that's maybe the same answer. But
I think for right now, it's Kelsey Mitchell. I mean, Kelsey Mitchell just her ability to score, her ability to score from the perimeter when you've gotten Melissa and Aaliyah in the paint, and that they know that they can kick it out to Kelsey and she's going to hit, like that just makes their lives much easier. Kelsey talked a lot in the preseason about how she's working on becoming more of a leader. And so I think that's going to be important too. Um, and in the long term, I really think Queen Egbo is going to be a special player. I think we're already seeing her do some crazy things on defense. So I think we're going to see more of that out of her. We're going to see a heck of a lot more of Queen Egbo Just she's so confident on the court. And that's another thing. Confidence on the court rubs off on your teammates. So even if Nalissa and Aaliyah are having a bad day, they see Queen Egbo have that confidence, and that's gonna motivate them.
That confidence and that energy. Yes, big fan of Queen Etbo. Kelsey Mitchell, I was really high on. I think there's been a little disdain for people on the roster just not fitting well enough yet, and I think Kelsey
Yeah.
Mitchell is one to stay.
Oh yeah, I mean Kelsey Mitchell signed a contract extension last year, the year before that, so she's I think financially she's there to stay.
Mm.
But Kelsey is that's the other thing. Like we think of Kelsey as the veteran. She's in her fifth season, sixth season. She's still in her 20s. She's still quite young. So we're like, I also think Kelsey is a long-term player for the Fever, and that we're gonna see some things out of this group. And I think I'm gonna make a bold prediction. You ready? I think this Fever team is gonna make the playoffs this year. Probably the eighth spot, but I do think they are, because
All
there's
right.
there's just something about them. I don't know.
I love it. I really, yeah, I mean, you can kind of feel the energy. I was in Indiana for that Fever game against Dallas in the preseason. And I thought of that because you brought up Kalani Brown, and I saw her next to Tierra McAllen and was like, holy cow, that's two giants out there on the floor. But
Giant people.
but
Yeah,
yes, the energy from Christy Sides and high fiving the team like nearly every other possession,
yeah,
and the excitement after that win. I'm a big fan of Indiana. I love that prediction for eighth. I had them just outside, so I hope that you're right,
yeah.
right up there. I think lastly here for Indiana is Nick Andre brought up the idea of fitting Queen Edbo into the starting lineup with Aaliyah and Alyssa. And I guess, do you think that's possible with I guess kind of a lack of shooting? Uh,
You know, I think it depends on how Aaliyah and uh Melissa, my goodness, getting old. Aaliyah and Melissa Smith are playing. If they're not having a great shooting game, or if they are having great shooting games, then yes, it seems to make sense. But I also don't. I think we often get hung up, especially like I know like people who play like daily fantasy and things like that, get a little hung up on who the starters are for good reason, because it has a real strong effect on how they do things. But I think Queen Egbo's ability to be a spark off the bench shouldn't be
mm,
overlooked. So, yes, maybe she could be a starter. I think it's totally possible, but I also think that the situation she's in right now is valuable.
that's very fair. Even I guess maybe her fitting into a lineup with those two down the stretch, closing a game. I just
Totally.
like the defensive versatility
Mhm.
that Queen Edbo brings. I think it could work if we
Yeah.
if we saw that happen. But yeah,
And
India.
it's who the opponent is. If they're playing Connecticut or if they're playing Vegas and they've got all those towers in the paint, then yeah, you want as much big as you can. But maybe when they're playing Chicago, where like Elizabeth Williams is about all the height you have, then you don't worry about it as much.
That's fair. That's fair. And hey, we're both pretty high on Indiana this season. I like that. I haven't
Yeah.
haven't really heard a whole lot of other people in that same boat, but I am still high even after kind of the slow start of the season, but I
Yeah.
see the potential too. Lastly, into our Bally Sports rankings here is Minnesota, and they have fallen a long way from where we saw them not too long ago, post Dynasty. I told you I had them 11th before the season. Right now, I see them in 12th.
Yeah.
Maggie, where are you on this team? Am I too low on this team?
I don't think you are. They are definitely struggling, and they've then been hit with some injuries on top of that. So
Mhm.
they're figuring out their identity of who they are as a team and as a franchise for the first time in more than a decade. That they don't have Sylvia Fowles or any of the five players that made up that starting lineup that were the heart of five or four championships. Like it was a special time. And I'm a Bulls fan, and I grew up, I was a high schooler in the 90s. So The Bulls were obviously won 6 championships in in the 90s. And after that, I always felt like in like probably the 10 years after, I said, I'm giving them grace. So I'm going to let them, figure out who the heck they are. And I feel like I'm not going to tell a Lynx fan how to feel, but I do think they're in that grace period. And I think they're in that time of figuring out what to do next. And when you look at the Lynx when Cheryl Reeve first took over, they weren't a good team. They had some of those pieces, not all of them. And then she was able to build them into what they were and help mold those outstanding pieces. So I think she deserves some time to get to maybe do that again. It's a whole new challenge for her. So,
I think that's a very fair place for them to be. I guess, yeah, Lynx fans might still have those really high expectations, which in some sense makes sense for them because that's what they're accustomed to. But like you said, after such a string of success, that's a really interesting point. I think from my vantage point, I see some holes on this roster, and I think that there's no problem with them potentially coming in last or not making the playoffs this year and solidifying a draft position in the years to come. But the holes I see
don't forget that Caitlin Clark is a Lynx fan. She grew up going to Lynx games. So,
all right.
I'm not saying, but I'm saying.
Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers is from the Minnesota
Paige
area.
Beckers is from Minnesota. So that's the thing. Like there's definitely some players and they need a point guard. So
that was the hole.
That's the big, huge gaping hole. And it makes me wonder when they look at how Crystal Dangerfield is playing so well in Dallas, if there's any like, damn it, we shouldn't have let her go. It's hard. It's hard. It is I don't ever want the job of being a GM because A, way too much math for me, but B, you need to you're trying to look into a crystal ball while also making things work right now and making all the numbers work. So I understood why they cut Crystal at the time, but I do think they wonder if they're like, we really need a point guard and she's doing a great job as a point guard for Dallas. So we'll see. But yeah.
And after what she did in New York last year as well.
Right.
So I guess besides looking forward to the draft specifically for this season, is there a solution at that point guard spot? Because Mariah Jefferson left in the offseason as well, but maybe playing more through Jessica Shepard. Have her facilitate.
I think there's a little bit of that. I think there's some. I think honestly, there's just going to have to be other players who learn how to bring the ball up, distribute the ball, put the play together, do that whole thing. Because if they don't, they're just not going to be able to score. And we saw in that loss to Chicago when they scored 3 points in their opening. It was in the second quarter of the opening game, and they scored 3 points in a quarter. How? I'm not going to say I could because I am old and unathletic, but I think a lot of people could score more than 3 points. So Chicago's defense is good, but they're not that good. I don't think anybody's defense is that good. So yeah, I was surprised at that. So that's the thing. They need somebody to run things through. And I think it's important to note that when you look at the last 2 champions of the WNBA, when you look at or actually 3, this could go back, they all had incredible point guards. The Aces had Chelsea Gray, the Sky had Courtney Vandersloot, and the Storm had Sue Bird. So it's important to have a good leading point guard to get anywhere in this league. There's a lot of teams that try to futz it a little bit, but you need a point guard.
Well, and I felt the same way about Minnesota in the last couple of seasons with Layshia Clarendon coming in and playing a huge role for that team. And then last year, Mariah Jefferson, the same thing. That team kind of starts to turn things around. Do you think there's any scenario this year where there's a push for the playoffs? And if not, when do we start to see some more playing time for the younger players. Like, I am excited to see more Dorka Juhas.
Yeah, Dorka's been playing great already. I got to tell you, UConn does a really good job of just making sure their players are W ready. I mean, they're not the only one. I think obviously South Carolina does a good job of it, Notre Dame, but I like Dorka's ability to just come in and learn has been great. So yeah, I think it's a delicate balance for Cheryl Reeve, but I think as of right now, with Diamond Miller injured, with Natalie Chanwa out with for maternity leave, and all of these different things kind of affecting them, I think we're going to see a lot of the younger players continue to play because they just gotta.
Yeah, that's very fair. And for Minnesota, look forward to those draft picks. It could be a long season, but try and enjoy some of those little improvements that we're looking forward to. Maggie, thank you so much for joining the show. We got through all those Bally Sports teams. I really appreciate you coming on.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into a pro basketball show. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Until next time, I'm Andrew Willett. Thank you for tuning in.